Hello, I'm Lorena Nava-Ruggiero, and you're watching SDSU Live, a live video production of San Diego State University. Today, as part of SDSU Month, I'm speaking with John Elder, public health professor, who will deliver the Albert W. Johnson Distinguished Research Lecture later today here at SDSU. John, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Lorena.
You're welcome. So let's just start off with a quick preview of what you're going to be talking about in your lecture. What do you plan on telling your audience about?
I'll be going through a series of studies I've done and worked with others to do on the use of community health advisors in health promotion and providing medical care to underserved people around the country and elsewhere internationally as well.
So I know that's kind of what we've dubbed it here on campus, the Promotora model, where you have in the Latino culture women who go out and promote to their local health communities. You know, during all this time, what kind of sparked the initial idea to use normal people, if you will, to go and talk to their community members about health? It seems kind of unique in a way, I guess would be a good way to put it.
Yeah, the term promotora is fairly common around here and in the border region, I think, and anywhere in Latin America and Latino communities in the U.S. And there was a lot of work already going on with this model, also called consejera model by some of my colleagues here, before I came here. My initial exposure to this was really through using paraprofessionals in community mental health outreach and trying to provide mental health services to the much broader community than MDs and PhDs, clinical psychologists such as I was, than they could possibly do. We can't cover that many people. So in the 1970s, there was this transition underway to try to scale down some of the training that one needed to be able to provide mental health services. So we did focus on using paraprofessionals, usually BA level people, and sometimes people who had gone to community colleges, master's level people, to provide many of the services that have been exclusively the domain of medical doctors, psychiatrists, and psychologists before. That was my initial interest. That I moved on into public health and heart disease prevention with the Pawtucket Heart Health Program in Rhode Island in the early 1980s. And this program was predicated on the use of volunteers to deliver all risk reduction and heart disease prevention messages. We had mixed success with that model. It didn't work perfectly well, I must admit, but nevertheless, it did kind of plant the seed for me. And then again, when I came here, the Promotora model was already sort of underway and being examined by colleagues and by some of my very first students in the MPH program when I started here in 1984.
You mentioned that you started off as a clinical psychologist. What made you move into more the public health realm?
Well, I discovered very quickly that many of the people we were seeing, even this is a community mental health center, so it was largely outpatient services we were providing, day hospitals sometimes. But many of the people we were seeing were coming in too late. Mm-hmm. Their life circumstances were already unraveling for them. They had so many difficulties that were piling up that it was very difficult really to work with them in order to make things better. And I started looking more and more at the possibility, for instance, not of treating a battered woman who was depressed and not treating the depression, but look at some of the domestic violence issues, and then looking at the causes of those issues, and maybe started thinking before I left mental health that we should be in high schools and classes that are gender specific, and talking to high school girls and high school boys about where their lives were headed and what some of the problems might be when they grew up and got married, and how to anticipate these and how to avoid some of these awful calamitous outcomes. That was the frustration, I think, working in a treatment-oriented setting. And I think that's why many people move into public health, is simply that we want to get closer to we want to move further upstream and try to find some of the very initial causes and do something about them before the person develops problems.
So it sounds like you kind of went into kind of the preventative medicine of that area in terms of, showing people how to prevent these things from happening to them, and that's how you moved into health
Yeah,
promotion.
as a psychologist, we maybe would call it behavioral medicine or
Yeah.
health psychology. But yeah, it certainly, that was a movement. A lot of people were leaving, mental health trained people, professionals were leaving the mental health services and moving into what we now see as part of public health.
Very interesting. Well, I know that you mentioned it a little while ago about doing research around the world and stuff, and you've been pretty much everywhere, from what I understand, doing health promotion work and stuff. And during your 20-plus years here at SDSU, basically, what keeps you here, considering you could be anywhere? I mean, what's the deal with SDSU? I mean, what keeps you coming back?
Well, San Diego State is a university that gets it. I have visited a lot of other campuses, a lot of schools of public health, both in private and public universities. Some very prestigious, I would guess, by their reputation, that I knew about many years ago when I was an undergraduate even. But often it doesn't seem to me they get it. They don't really understand some of the nuances of reaching out to diverse communities, which America is increasingly so. They're still sort of working with an old model, an old social model of well-educated and well-meaning people trying to go into communities at need and fixing things. And I think San Diego State really is past that. You see the diversity in the student body on campus, you see it in among the graduate students, and increasingly so among faculty. You don't see that at many other places.
It's interesting that you would mention the students and faculty members. I know that many of your current faculty members in the Graduate School of Public Health used to be your students, and here at SDSU we really espouse the teacher-scholar model, where you not only get to do your research, but you also get to teach. Why do you think it's important to mentor? Because you've obviously done this with the folks that you work with now.
Well, mentoring is giving back. To the extent I'm able to do that, I've been very lucky in my life, and I had good mentors in my graduate student days and postdoc days. So it's just a way of giving back. It makes sense to me. And I've had three former mentees, if that's a word, are now faculty in the School of Public Health. Two are postdoctoral fellows with me, and a third was a PhD student. That's the most fundamental reason. But the second very specific reason in my case has been to work with the Latino community. I strongly feel that it not only makes moral sense, but it makes practical sense that you're going to have Latino colleagues working with you if that's what you want to do. And that was a real deficit, I think, when I got here. And it was very clear to me that we needed to develop Latino students, we needed to develop faculty, whether it was identifying talented doctoral, postdoctoral students who could be good faculty, or recruiting them from around the country. Either way, I mean, that was really important. And I just don't think we have an effective message with the diverse community if we ourselves are not diverse. It doesn't make sense.
It's a good segue into my next question, working with diverse communities. Why do you have such a huge commitment to San Diego's Latino community specifically? Because you've done so much work here over the years with your fellow colleagues.
It's a very complex question, I guess. I'm not even sure what all the answers are. But my parents from early days engendered a sense of social commitment and responsibility with me, having both moral and political sorts of meaning for them. And so I always thought that way. I always felt that the United States was, the fundamental philosophy of the United States was equality, and that meant across peoples, that meant across social classes, which should break down and change as time went on. So I always felt that way. And all my professional work has been, whether it was in Appalachia or in a kind of a Rust Belt part of New England or here, most of my work has been with disadvantaged communities. At a personal level, it's been really interesting for me to learn so much more about the Latino community. Other than my time in the military service, I really had no exposure to it. When I got here, it was just really a neat thing to learn about, and being right here on the border to travel to Mexico and to identify students and learn more about them and about their personal as well as their professional lives. And so that was just natural for me. The final thing I must say is working in primarily Mexican immigrant, Mexican American cultures and communities. And just personally, it's very nice people, so it made it easy.
Definitely, definitely. So I have to touch on kind of why you got the Albert W. Johnson Distinguished Lectureship, Research Lectureship. Earlier this year, Vice President of Research and Graduate Dean Tom Scott had this to say about your research productivity here on campus. John has won more than $60 million in extramural funding since coming to SDSU in 1984, primarily in competition from the National Institutes of Health. To offer a perspective on that amount, if John had been at California State University last year, he would have ranked 11th among the 24 entrants, 23 CSUs plus John, and he has been among the top 5% of NIH awardees nationwide for the past 26 years. I guess my question is, what continues to drive you to seek out these competitive research grants? And you've collaborated with people across campus for these as well. Why keep on going for this, and how do you explain this success? I mean, this is pretty extraordinary.
Well, 60 million that's a very generous figure that Vice President Scott put out there. That's actually 2/3 of that is under someone else's leadership. So these are people I work with who have been principal investigators on 40 million of that 60 million. So I don't want to take too much credit here. Having said that, there are two things I think that should be examined. One is that, as I was just alluding to before, when I got San Diego State, it was an early decision, an important decision for me to emphasize working with the Latino community. That developed over the first few years, but that became something I wanted to do. And the advantage for us, for myself and my early colleagues, was that there weren't many people doing that had that emphasis in the United States. There were a lot of people doing health research, of course, and most of which was in middle-class populations, white Anglo populations. So that field was covered. Substantial number of people doing work in African-American communities, but very, very few working in Latino communities. So that was a good professional reason to consider that, and San Diego State, again, as I mentioned, was a good ground for that. But the other thing was that in the early 1980s, SDSU made an important strategic decision, and that was to differentiate itself as a research-oriented university, and hence the development of the SDSU Foundation, which is now the SDSU Research Foundation, extensive graduate programs, doctoral programs, a lot of things that made us more competitive. And as an Avis #2, we try harder university, because we competing with the UC schools, it was not automatic that people would recognize SDSU as a research university. It was, we had to figure out a way, strategies, faculty and administration alike, that would make us in the top tier, put us in the top tier. And I think that's what happened. I think all those things kind of converged. We had a population that we were more successful at reaching out to, and we had a strategy that was much more pragmatic and much more flexible than, say, some of our competing universities. So I really think that it was just the convergence of all of these factors that contributed to this success. Now, I don't want to be a CSU campus, so it's not interesting to me. But it is, you know, the CSU system, including San Diego State, we have major teaching responsibilities. And so it was important to come up with some ways for us to add that research quality to the to this environment, and that's what I think has placed us at the top, SDSU at the top of all CSU schools. Now, to return a compliment, if SDSU were a UC school, we'd rank somewhere in the middle of research productivity, so not very bad. But it's just all come together very well.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been a good fit for SDSU, and it's been a good fit for you as well.
Yes.
So, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. John, thank you again for joining me. And again, John will be speaking at 2 p.m. Later today as part of that lecture in the College of Arts and Letters, room 201. You've been watching SDSU Live. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you tune in again soon.
This is our community.
We work together, play together, and serve the community together.
We fuel the region's economy.
We're pride and spirit.
Exploration and achievement, the foundation and the future of San Diego.
More than 200,000 strong.
But it's not just who we are. It's what we do for the place we call home.
This is your time.
Aztec for life.
Make the connection.